Welcome to the very best part of my broadcast week. This, as you know, folks, is our Thanksgiving weekend show. So you're giving thanks for many things, I'm sure. Let me suggest something you ought to give thanks for that you might not have on your list. You should give thanks for the March on Washington in 1963. Why? Because that march not only created the largest peaceful demonstration in the nation's capital up until that time, it helped create a movement that led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act, later the Voting Rights Act. We don't know whether or not those two things would have happened had there not been a March on Washington, but we can be fairly certain it would have been much, much harder and probably much more distant from that March of Washington in August of 1963 had there been no march. So if you're going to be thankful for that march, and I urge you to be thankful for that march, you need to be thankful for Bayard Rustin, who is a figure central to that march and all that transpired from it. Why am I going through this introduction? Because for the remainder of this program, we're going to be talking about a film you can see in movie theaters or you can watch on Netflix, the title of which is Rustin, about Bayard Rustin, a fascinating, sometimes overlooked part of American history and the story of the March on Washington. I want to bring to your attention one of the actors in the great movie Rustin, Glynn Turman, who plays A. Philip Randolph, a significant figure in his own right. We'll get to that in a second. Glynn, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Jim. Thank you for having me, man.
Tell me about the process of putting together the film Rustin and what you hope audiences will take from it.
Well, Higher Ground is a production company that put this together, and Higher Ground, of course, is created by the Obamas. This is their new production. President Obama, Barack Obama, and Michelle Obama, and they've gone into show business. And what a leap they have taken. And they started with a character and a subject matter that, of course, is close and dear to their heart, and is too long coming in the telling of this story. President Obama gave Bayard Rustin a Medal of Honor.
Presidential Medal of Freedom, yes.
Presidential Medal of Freedom, which was a noble gesture. As a man who definitely deserved it. And apparently he wasn't just kidding about that. He wanted to let everybody know why this guy got this award. And the best way I think he figured was to tell the story of who this guy was, And so therefore we have Rustin. Now to put that together, to make all that happen, he called on a young man by the name of George C. Wolfe. And George C. Wolfe is a 5-time Tony Award winning director.
Towering figure.
Working here. So, little guy, but a giant, a little giant. And I had the pleasure of working with, and I hope most of your viewers or listeners have seen Ma Rainey's Black Bottom on Netflix as well. So he put the band of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom back together, and to help him bring forth the story of Bayard Rustin. And this is today, I think, is the opening day for Netflix.
Yes.
So everybody across the world can see it.
Right. We're recording this on November 17th. And so, yes, today, November 17th, but by the time our audience hears, it'll be a week old. But yes, November 17th, it becomes available.
Okay. Right.
And Glynn Turman, you play A. Philip Randolph. It occurred to me watching the film, which I've watched twice. It's that good, ladies and gentlemen, that there could be, there eventually might be a movie called Randolph, because A. Philip Randolph is a massive figure earlier in the civil rights struggle than Bayard Rustin. What component part does A. Philip Randolph play in the story that this movie tells? Because it's really important.
A. Philip Randolph was responsible for integrating the armed forces, making that happen, and also for creating the Pullman's Porters Union.
Mm-hmm.
He was a union man, union organizer. And it was his dream actually to also have had that march on Washington, but he failed in his attempt some 10 years prior to that, to when it actually did happen. Now, what kind of stood him apart was that with all the controversy around Bayard Rustin, his lifestyle, his choices, his openness, A. Philip Randolph was one of the only men who stood by him,
Mm-hmm.
Bayard Rustin.
Yep.
He was the one who said, "I don't care about your choices, your lifestyle, who you
Mm-hmm.
are. I don't care who you've chosen to love. You are my friend. You're good at what you do, and we can't do this without you." So he went against a lot of the organizers of that day for NAACP, for SNCC, CORE,
Right.
congressmen, and so on and so forth. So he was a staunch ally of A. Philip Randolph. Of Bayard Rustin's, and made sure that he stayed the course.
And for those who are coming to this topic with less than they will get in terms of knowledge on the other side of the movie, Bayard Rustin had one time had communist affiliations, very short-lived, but they kept cropping up, and the criticism of him, of the organization of the march, of the civil rights movement generally. He was an openly gay black man. That was used against him, the associations, his proclivities, his attitudes. That was something that was not only potentially weaponized by critics of the march in the white community, the white press, as it's referred to in the movie, but some within the civil rights community itself. That was a point of tension, and it was a recurring point of tension. And A. Philip Randolph, as the movie clearly shows, was one of the few stalwart buffers in defense of Bayard Rustin.
It's a wonderful role. I was honored to play it. George offered me that role. I said, "Oh my God, this is an iconic figure. This is an iconic movie. Are you sure you want me?" but I couldn't persuade him otherwise, and I didn't try hard to not use me. I was just honored, and and all of the wonderful things that came along with it. Meeting over the Zoom, we had a chance to talk with Barack Obama, and that was a wonderful story. And I'll tell you a short story, if you don't mind.
Please.
I can tell you.
Please.
So when I mentioned earlier that we had some trouble with the movie because of the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
so we had to shut down production for some time, and so to keep everybody's spirits up, we got word came to us that we were going to have a Zoom call with the president, President Obama. And so everybody, I'm here right where I am now, sitting talking with you, in my little office here in Hollywood and in California. And I tell my wife, "Shh, you got to be quiet. I'm going to be on Zoom with Obama. So keep everything quiet down here." Blah, blah, blah. She said, "You going to be talking? Is Michelle going to be there too?" I said, "I don't know if Michelle's going to be there, but she's going to have." She said, "What time is it? 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock. I can't be late. I can't." So sure enough, he gets on, and there we are. And we're talking with him, and he's telling us to hang in there. Don't worry. We're going to go back and get the stuff that we didn't get, And so all of a sudden, there's a door behind me that I've tried to angle out because all of a sudden during that call, it starts creaking open, and I can see it. I can see it on the Zoom call. And of course, it's my wife, and she's sticking her hand in, and she's waiting. She just had to see the president, Couldn't believe he was in the office, So it was funny. It was funny.
Oh, that is the Zoom call of all Zoom calls.
Yes.
So, Glynn, we're going to head to segment two. I'm going to talk to Aml Ameen, who plays Martin Luther King Jr. in the film. Then we're going to talk to Colman Domingo. So thank you for your time. Congratulations on the movie. And it's been an honor to talk to you, honor to meet you, and I appreciate it very much. We'll talk to you again.
You too. Thank you very much. Talk to you soon.
I had a dream about Martin Luther King, and I found it very strange. And not more than a month later, I was offered an opportunity to audition for Rustin.
Welcome back to the Takeout, your Thanksgiving weekend edition. I've told you what I think humbly is a suggestion. You should, at least at one level or another, think about, write down as something you're thankful for, the March on Washington, 1963. You might also, this weekend, enjoy a movie. I highly recommend Rustin, about Bayard Rustin. And now we are joined by Aml Ameen, who plays Martin Luther King Jr. in that film. Aml, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to meet you. Great to see you, mate. Nice to meet you too. When you just said Aml Ameen, who's playing Martin Luther King, it doesn't cease to amaze me that I got this opportunity and just like what that means, Martin Luther King, to America, but also around the world. You know, this figure to us. Yeah,
that's where I want to start, Aml, because I have to believe that for an actor, getting a role like that is a spectacular opportunity, but I imagine it also comes with a unique burden. Like, we have an image, we have a sense, we have a belief in this larger than life person, in some cases a marbleized person who seems untouchable, unreachable, and you have to play them as a human being. And you have to relate to them and then bring that character across through the film. Opportunity, but I've got to think a unique challenge.
110%. I remember I was in Canada at the time shooting something else and really focused on shooting something else and editing the movie. And I, strangely enough, during that time, like, had a dream, no joke. And that dream was literally, I know it sounds bonkers, but it was that I had a dream about Martin Luther King, and I found it very strange. And not more than a month later, I was offered an opportunity to audition for Rustin. And when the Rustin came in, I was like, I don't know who Rustin is. And I had to quickly, go and Google Rustin and just understood that Martin Luther King and Rustin are paired in Martin's journey completely. And so in thinking to myself, all right, I'm gonna audition for this person, and how am I gonna get into this place where I'm believable? Loads of people have done it before. I'm walking in the shadow of really great actors that have done it before. And it was George C. Wolfe, mate. It was George C. Wolfe that completely calmed my nerves. And he said, like you said, the marbleized figure is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking to put the blood and the soul and the quest back into Martin. It's Martin at a younger time in his life where he's become this star, but he's not yet become this icon. And the relationship between him and Bayard Rustin is a really unique, quiet, powerful relationship that completely shifted what we understand Martin Luther King to be in terms of what he used with nonviolence to actually go forth and be effective in the civil rights. And so to me, like, that initially just calmed me down. And then I just completely focused, and I decided to lean into method acting. When I first day arrived on set, everybody met me as King. In the voice, I would meditate and read and watch a lot of his interviews, just his interviews, not the big speeches, but just his interviews, and of how he's smiling and how he's laughing and how he's interacting, the nuances of his personality. And from there, I was able to kind of sit in the seat of his soul and just live. And then George would capture. So that was the first week there.
That's so important, because to get Martin Luther King in this movie, you're talking in small offices, in a living room,
home settings, yeah,
quiet settings where the fullness that we're mostly accustomed to seeing for King, the large voice, the oratory. That's not what's happening. It
No.
is a quieter, sometimes more methodical. And early in the movie, unhappily for Bayard Rustin, borderline ruthless in making a decision to accept a resignation that Bayard Rustin never thought his friend, his dear friend Martin Luther King, would accept. I'll leave it at that. The story plays itself out, but it's a tough moment.
Mm-hmm.
And to capture all that is one of the essences of the brilliance of your acting in the movie, if I can be allowed to say so.
That's very kind of you, man. Thank you very much. I think it really helped as well. Me and Colman Domingo have had a friendship for over a decade since a film we did called The Butler. And so we were able to just kind of seep into this very well lived in friendship of laughter and joy and history and conversations that we've had for so long. And within the context of that, it sped up this idea of chemistry. And you know, I was very clear for myself. I was there to support Colman in the storytelling of Bayard Rustin, the unsung hero, to America and to the world. And so for me, that was the position I took. And from that position, we were able to just maneuver and move together, man. A lot of fun was had. It's just a special project. In terms of the Martin Luther King aspect of things, what I love about it is it humanizes that moment in his life where he's like, I have a decision to make. Will I be affected by something? Or will I make what can be called a ruthless, calculated, or what he may even thought of as the best decision at the time for the movement? Because we have to look at through the context of that particular lens and the period of time we're living in. And I love that the film journeys in a very nuanced way to that part of the relationship getting worked out.
Right.
You know,
what the reconciliation means to both of them and how that reconciliation is the fuel for the March on Washington and its ultimate success.
And that they needed each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, King had the energy and the oratory skills, and Bayard Rustin had the mind and organization and was able to mobilize the people behind the scenes in a way that King couldn't, being the central focal point.
Tell me about the voice and how you pulled that voice of Martin Luther King into yourself.
Wow. Well, listen, first of all, I got help. You know, I worked with Liz Himmelstein, who is a voice coach. And I went to her house in Los Angeles, and she really took me through the rhythms of how he speaks, not just when he gives the speech, what is famously called the I Have a Dream speech, but how he speaks and where the root of his accent comes from. That actually he has Bostonian influences as well as Southern influences. He's traveled, you know, comes from a family where, you know, in that particular time, he's kind of the son of a wealthy man, you know, not necessarily financially, but in terms of the community. And so what that does to your voice and how it gives you confidence. And, you know, I come from a family in the Caribbean. My dad is from St. Vincent and my mom's from Jamaica. And I come from a family of political speech writers. And so, you know, my version of that is actually, I became an actor, but my grandfather and father and uncles always give speeches. So that bit wasn't foreign to me, the art of actually giving a speech. But getting Martin's voice down, there's a musicality to it that is rested, and also a reflection. And I tell you one story actually that I was thinking of when people have asked me, what's it like to step in his shoes? What's it like to be king? And because I was mostly always in that zone, I can tell you what I experienced. There's this idea of, you know, don't judge not by the color of your skin, but by the contents of your character. And I said to myself, well, what does that actually mean in reality? What does that actually mean? And what I found it to mean it is delaying judgment of people, period. So it's completely and utterly being in the moment to moment, engaged in someone, and you experience this version of nirvana. You've experienced this kind of euphoria over you. And you're like, oh my God, this is what it's like to really listen
Mhm.
This is what it's like to take my time. And that is what King did. And that's what I experienced during it, where I'm quite fast. My mind's always going, you know what I mean? But like for this, I was like, oh wow, this is what it's like to take your time. And that was a real access point for me, deciding to slow down, not judge people in terms of what they're going to say, what they look like, anything like that, and just slow down and take them in.
Right, because only at the dramatic conclusion of the movie do we hear Martin Luther King raise his voice, and he raises it in an exultation at the culmination of his speech, which is now very well familiar to most people.
Mm.
In the film, though he's a preacher, he's the least preacher-like character in the film.
That's ironic, you know? I think that's the brilliance of George, you know, delaying that thing that we are waiting for, right? You know?
Right. At times, Bayard Rustin sounds like a preacher. Elias Taylor clearly sounds like a preacher.
Yeah.
Martin almost never does until the very end. And that restraint throughout the film, of course, makes that culminating moment all the more powerful. And so in your quieter, reserved, non-judgmental moments, all of that comes through what you just described.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Listen, it's been a great pleasure. We're going to talk to Colman Domingo for 2 segments and Branford Marsalis. That's all coming up. Congratulations on the film. It must have been a blast to put together. I hope you're enjoying all of the critical acclaim it so richly deserves. Aml Ameen, been a great pleasure of mine to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Major.
He's such a fascinating thinker. He's very much an original that was marginalized in the history books because he was openly gay.
Welcome back to the Takeout and our Thanksgiving week recognition and celebration of a movie I urge you to watch because I believe in my heart you will thoroughly enjoy it. The movie is Rustin. It's about Bayard Rustin. And I'm so deeply grateful that we have Colman Domingo, who plays the lead character, Bayard Rustin. Colman, it's great to see you. Congratulations. I want to give you a compliment. So I'm a big fan of the movie Lincoln, in which you had a role. Yeah. I think most of us who are fans of that movie believe, because we don't know what Abraham Lincoln was like, but we believe Daniel Day-Lewis came to embody exactly who we think Abraham Lincoln was. I don't know Bayard Rustin. I never met him, but it felt to me, sir, that you captured who he was, and I felt as if I was watching him. So well done.
Thank you so much. First of all, I love that the fact that you drew a comparison to Daniel Day-Lewis's Lincoln, which I've always carried with me because he really was. Watching him work, he was capturing the soul of Lincoln. So I sort of witnessed how to be useful in that way and really give the soul of a person and no mimicry. Daniel Day-Lewis still is my idealized, he's Lincoln to me. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell me what captivated you about this project and what you hope those who watch it will take from the movie.
He's such a fascinating man. He's such a fascinating thinker. He's very much an original that was marginalized in the history books because he was openly gay. There was everyone who knows Bayard Rustin or who knew Bayard Rustin knew that he was usually one of the smartest men in the room, and he can organize and strategize and really work. All of the way he knows how to work between unions and coalitions to really get things done. He rolled up his sleeves and got things done. And so it was a travesty for the fact that we don't know who he is. He inspired Martin Luther King. They were very close friends. That was also sort of the thing that was always being challenged is their friendship and how, because of the way Bayard lived his life. But he also inspired a future president, President Barack Obama. Barack Obama said that there would be no Barack Obama if there was no Bayard Rustin. He was one of the greatest thinkers, organizers who inspired him.
There are so many great lines in the movie. One of them early on is a conversation between Bayard Rustin and Martin Luther King. Own your power.
Yeah.
That's a very specific part of the movie with a very specific clarion call. But let's be honest, that's a line we could all use and well remember.
Yeah, we can. I think that he was speaking that to a young Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King before the "I Have a Dream" speech on the Mall. So he was supporting this young man to be exactly who he needed to be. So to force him to be, to have that voice. And I think we need that. I think that's what Bayard did at his very best with young people, inspiring to say that, hey, you have agency, you have access, you can actually do it, and you can change the world and make the world the place that you want it to be. So we need that spirit. We need, especially right now, we're living in such dark times, and sometimes I think it feels hopeless for people, especially young people. And I think a film like this inspires and charges us to believe that we can make a difference, because we've seen ourselves make a difference before. We just have to get the right tools.
Right. And one of the things that I love about the movie is that it talks about something that can sound pedantic, organizing, setting up typewriters here, phone banks over here, something on the wall to write on. All of that doesn't really feel that dramatic or exciting, yet it has a pulse within it and a goal before it. And you see it come to fruition, and you understand it doesn't happen without those fundamentals, without those sort of basic, quote unquote, non-dramatic things.
Exactly. Organizing to me is sexy. That's what I've taken from this film, that it's like, you see, he's turned on by the possibilities of what we can do when we all come together for a great cause. And we have to be attached to the details. It's always about the details. I think that's something that's my takeaway of understanding, getting to know Bayard Rustin. He was very much attached to the details, because he knows that it's all the small things that help build, so we can get to that mountain together.
And one of the other powerful and dramatic thematic elements of the movie is to help those who may not know the history of the civil rights movement come to understand that it wasn't always cohesive internally, that there were genuine rivalries.
Lots of personalities.
There were some personalities, animosities, throwdown moments in which people were against one another, even though in theory and in reality for the same cause. And that's why you needed, that's a human story.
Yes. And that's why you needed that thinker and that person like Bayard Rustin, who wanted to coalesce and gather all that energy and galvanize it for one cause. That was his whole purpose of the March on Washington, because he knew the SCLC, the SNCC, the NAACP, everyone had their own way of doing things. That's very human. And then there's ego, and there's, infighting, you name it, instead of actually, hey, let's all come together for this common good, the March on Washington for jobs and freedom. We can do it together.
And you mentioned his erasure from history. Do you think it was that very movement that was, at least initially, most responsible for that erasure?
Absolutely, without a doubt, because I think that I do know that, I think with the fight for civil rights, there was sort of a veneer, a way of being, of presenting yourselves in the world, which is still very conservative in a way, but it was the way that they had the belief that that's the way they move forward. Being openly gay. There's many things about Bayard Rustin I felt that were triggering for people, and they didn't want to deal with. And so they basically would just prefer that he just did his work and went into the corner, which is, in our film, you actually see that he was, when they're invited to the Oval Office after the march, the Big Six, that Bayard does not go with them. And he understands, it's a lingering moment, but the thing that is important to him is just to, let me go do the work. So he became more attached to the work than the amplification of what he does.
There's an exchange in the movie that talks about what you're just referring to, Colman Domingo, quote, the suffocating chains of Negro respectability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that I think that he was, again, he was living outside the margins in many ways. He was Black, a Quaker. He grew up in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He played the lute, sang Elizabethan love songs, and I don't know, and he was openly gay at a time.
And early in his life, he had some sort of low-level communist affiliations, which he then
Absolutely.
renounced. But that became
Absolutely.
part of the biography
That
used
becomes part of
against
his
him in the
story.
movement.
Absolutely becomes part of his story. Anything that keeps him from being exactly who he needs to be to help do the work that is greater than himself.
We've got about 45 seconds, so we'll carry this into the next segment. How did you prepare for this? What did you watch? What did you read?
I read, there's many, there's biographies, there's the Brother Outsider documentary, there's writings of his writings, his journals, of his essays, there's debates, there's one in particular of him and Malcolm X that's fascinating. There's his album of Elizabethan love songs and hymns. There's whatever I could put my fingers on to find what he touched, but also I don't only research Bayard Rustin, I research the times as well that he was living in, to make sure that I'm building a whole human being who has to operate through this space and how he operates, in his mind and his body, even his inflections of his voice and the accent that he created for himself, which was sort of this version of a mid-Atlantic standard. So he's a fascinating character. So I researched for about a good 5 months and did my homework so I can actually just be available and create.
And I can tell you that electrifying human presence comes across on the string. And the reason is Colman Domingo. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in 1 second. Stay tuned for segment 4 of The Takeout.
It is and was an experience and a role of a lifetime, truly, because he's one of my heroes.
Welcome back to The Takeout. The film is Rustin, available on Netflix and in movie theaters around the country. The lead actor, Colman Domingo. Colman, was this a role that you could not live without? Meaning when you heard it was available, you did everything humanly possible to land it?
No, that sounds really intense. I don't operate that way. Actually, I think I just had a faith and a trust that I could use and access things, and I have the tenacity and the spirit to want to tell his story. So I know I have the want and the desire, and then it came my way. I worked with George C. Wolfe on Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and I'm sure he knew that I wanted to take part and be a part of it in some way, shape, or form. But also, I wanted to leave it to George. I needed him to find the buyer that fit in his mind of the film. So I just had to be patient and just, I don't know, keep it in my heart and in my mind. And then it came my way. So, and then I gave it everything I had, to be honest. It is and was an experience and a role of a lifetime, truly, because he's one of my heroes.
And it strikes me, having watched the film twice, that it is in many ways a double love story that has components of disappointment, exhilaration. The one love story is the movement, the march, the pursuit to bring America closer to its definition of freedom, but also Bayard Rustin and those with whom he falls in love with, whether temporarily or in search thereof. And that seems to be parallel throughout the movie, it seems to me.
And I think that's part of the thing that I love the most about our film, is that we don't shy away from his want, needs, and desires as a queer man. A lot of times I think when working on a biopic, they would rather choose not to deal with that and just choose with his ideology and thought and organizing and strategy and all that stuff and let that be the film. But we get into the messiness of his life, because it wasn't a very clean and pristine life either, but it helped build this complex idea of this human being who was just doing what was in front of him and trying to have love, trying to have access and agency, failing at times, especially when it comes to love, because there was no blueprint on how to have a relationship as a queer man at that time. There was a lot of danger, and you were trying to navigate and have love or like or sex or something,
And that idea of innuendo, that specter of innuendo, chased him everywhere, chased him even in his relationship with Dr. King.
Absolutely. That was always something that people can use against you. You could always use, in the 1960s in particular, you could lose your whole livelihood. You can lose your job. You could, you can be completely ostracized. Talk about cancel culture. They were waiting for the moment to cancel anyone who was a known convicted homosexual.
When the movie Harriet came out in 2019, there were conversations about, well, it wasn't a great story of telling her, and there weren't enough historical references. It was somewhat shallow. It was kind of conventional. And I saw someone comment about that generally in a review saying, well, in America, there are 30 films about George Custer. There's one about Harriet Tubman. So why don't we have 29 more films about Harriet Tubman, and we'll have a whole range of things. My question to you is, would you like to see more films about Bayard Rustin? And that whole idea that we can take people from American history who have been either erased or completely non-touched and do lots of films about them and take them from lots of different perspectives.
I might not be the right one to ask this question, because I feel that I like the idea of, like, there's a great way in to a character in a story, and then it's up for you to interrogate the rest. I feel like I need to do my homework now. I don't need another experience. I think, like, okay, you have one, but now you have to go and find some more. What I think is important is stories like Bayard's, but also the people like Ella Baker, who's featured in the film, or A. Philip Randolph. Other stories, Cleve Robinson. There's many other stories and many other people who are unsung, unknown, who deserve their stories to be taken out of the shadows as well. So hopefully it's an opportunity like that people are like, oh, I want more of Ella Baker. Let's go through her lens. Wouldn't that be lovely? That'd be good for all of us. Thank you.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Colman Domingo, it's been lovely to talk to you, sir. Be well. Thanks so much for the time.
Major, thank you.
I mean, if you look at a popular music chart in any part of the early 1960s, there's literally everything you can imagine on that chart.
Welcome to your Takeout Outtake Especial, continuing our conversation and, yes, indeed, our Thanksgiving week celebration of the movie Rustin. And if you watch it, and I really urge you to do so, you will understand very quickly that music plays a very important part in the propulsion, the backbeat of this movie. And that's all the credit of the person behind the soundtrack, Branford Marsalis, who does not need any introduction at all, other than for me to say, Branford, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Major. It's nice to see you.
So tell me about your inspiration for the music in this movie and why it is such a joyously noticeable part of the movie itself.
Well, the 1960s were a turbulent time socially, but a fantastic time musically. I mean, if you look at a popular music chart in any part of the early 1960s, there's literally everything you can imagine on that chart. Right. Novelty songs like Ray Stevens, and religious songs, country and Western songs, because it was country and Western back then, and R&B songs. It was just everything. So the great thing about that time period was there's a lot of things that work, and I'm essentially a child of the 60s. So it allowed me to go back and listen to and curate some of the music I grew up with.
And the movie itself, about a really important topic that has its deeply sorrowful moments, the civil rights movements, the setbacks, the violence, the suffering. Some of those movies have a bluesy or darker or slower musical tempo. Rustin has, I would say, by contrast, more of a jazzy, upbeat tempo. Intentional?
I really do. And I'm not being modest when I say it. I take my cues from our director, from George Wolfe. And I think it was intentional. There was a really cool movie that I saw as a younger person called Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored. It was directed by Tim Reed, the actor who was famous for that TV show WKRP in Cincinnati.
Right.
And it received a lot of criticism because it shied away from the dark, morose reality of being a Black person in the South. And his explanation was that the dark, morose moments are basically, at best, 5% of the time. in the day-to-day lives of Black Southerners. And I think George being a Southerner and myself being a Southerner, we understand and identify with that reality. So we tended to use music that really fit the characters and fit what the script was, and not use the music to do excessive moralizing, for lack of a better term.
And I may be reaching a bit here musically outside of my area of expertise, but I'm a huge jazz aficionado, and jazz is both improvisational and collaborative. And the movie tells a story about someone who is an individualized impresario, but also who has to work collaboratively and has to orchestrate. And it seems to me jazz is the perfect vehicle to musically help tell that story.
It really is, particularly jazz in that time, because jazz at that time was still, it was still a cousin of dance music. Now it's a very distant cousin to dance music. So all of the musicians who were playing and popular at that time were born between 1910 and 1933 or 34. So they grew up in the big band era. So the music had that sense of propulsion that jazz was known for a long time, when the sound of jazz and the beat of jazz was actually elevated above the improvisational part.
And what, Branford Marsalis, is the fine line between having music that is propulsive but not intrusive in a movie?
That's where the director and the music editor come in. And I had 2 music editors on this project, but the end result, Joe DeBisi did a really great job of working with George, because I stay out of that process, and I think most composers do, because it is George's film, and he needs to make what he thinks are the best decisions for the film without intrusion from people who have a vested interest in that part of the production. So I think they do a really great job of that. And George does have really great instincts about when music is too intrusive or invasive, to be honest. He does a really good job with that.
Someone who's won multiple Tonys probably would have a very good sense of the blending of dialogue, drama, silence, and music. There's also quite obviously, and this is part and parcel not only of the era and the movement and those who are participating in it, Negro spirituals, to use a phrase of that time. That is a phrase of the time. I'm not speaking out of turn. They're there and they're beautiful. And Mahalia Jackson is there and beautiful as ever, as always, as permanently.
Well, even in this time, I still call them Negro spirituals. So I don't know what else to call them. I haven't hyphenated it yet, so we'll roll with that.
Right.
Mahalia was fantastic. Her voice was again a clarion call for the country, because when she sang, she stereotypically represented Black America, but when you think about her music in general, she represented the country. She represented the United States of America and the spiritual fabric of our country, which is why I think her renditions of songs was so emotionally moving to people across the country, regardless of race.
And what for you, Branford Marsalis, was compelling about this project, this story, and making sure that it landed as well as possible, musically and otherwise?
Well, there's so many moving parts to movies. And as a composer, we don't really have control over most of them. But I think that it's clear that the project arrived with a fantastic script. And through the collaboration of George and the writers and the producers, they came up with a script that tries to educate and entertain at the same time, so that you leave with an uplifted feeling, not a sense of, life is terrible, life is horrible. So I think that they did a masterful job of that. And the music is usually written once the filming is done. We work in post-production, not in actual production. And the trick is to write music that stays out of the way until it's needed. And I try my best to do that. And where I overstep my bounds, there's old George Wolfe to crack the belt and say, nope, do it again.
And what's that experience like when you have done what you just described, then you see it married to the final product and you get to watch it. What does that feel like? What is that experience like?
I mean, it's always more exciting the first time you see it, but I'm so immersed in the movie when I watch it that I don't focus on the music. The first time that I saw the movie it was at the Toronto Film Festival. I saw it on a large screen, and that scene with Ruby Bridges in the beginning brought me to tears.
Yep.
And the scene at the end with Bayard Rustin picking up trash brought me to tears. And I can't say that it was the music that did it. I think the music helped, and the music was very, very simple. It was just both times. It was just piano parts, just a simple piano melody. But it was just such a great and moving film for me that we had to do a Q&A after that. And I said, y'all are gonna have to handle this because I'm still crying. So it took me a couple of minutes to get myself together after that. So,
and I can tell anyone listening or watching that if you take the time, and I do urge you to take the time, watch the film, you will by turns smile and possibly cry, possibly weep. It is that emotionally moving, that powerful. And one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons is the soundtrack put together by our special guest, Branford Marsalis. It's been a pleasure, Branford. Thank you so much for your time. Be well. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. You as well. Great to talk to you.